Okay, so good morning, everybody. Hello again. So we are here for going ahead with module 1. This being the second lecture, let's see what we have in store. So I propose to cover today a few portions in module 1. As I had said, there are two halves: management and planning. So I propose to cover the things that had been left spoken in the last class on definition of management and the nature of management, as well as the functions that are covered in management, the importance, what necessarily constitutes the different levels of management, and of course, lastly, managerial skills. So as I told you, module 1 we have two halves. One is the management and the other is in planning. So I propose to actually have a large bite of module 1 today. As you see, it almost covers more than half of it. So the remaining halves would be covered in the ensuing 7 videos. This is what I plan on doing. Okay, so the textbook that will be used will party. Now, uh, the art of getting things done through people is how Mary Parker Follett describes management. Let's just go through the three different definitions and I'll get back to each of them. It's a process of planning, organizing, actuating, and controlling that's done to determine and accomplish the objectives by using people and resources, is how George Terry defines or opines. Now, going through most of the definitions, this is a popular way of describing management. It is that management is a process, it's a discipline, a human activity, and a career. So these are the four terms that describe management. So let's go through each of them individually. So as you see, I have rewritten the same definition uh, with three colors. So these three colors are the three parts of the definition uh, that Mary Parker Follett has given. It is an art. Management is an art of getting things done through people. So there is an active activity, and then there are people, and then it is an art form. So there's a lengthy discussion regarding what is art and how is management and art and so on and so forth. Let's get into that a little later. But George Terry, he's not happy with this definition and adds on to this getting things done and says what exactly needs to be done. So he says it's a process of planning, organizing, actuating, and controlling. Okay, so there are specific activities performed to do something. What is that? To accomplish and determine goals or objectives. Using what? Using people and resources. So there are more extra dimensions that he puts in. So additionally, I would like to tell that uh, management is a process. It's defined as a systematic method of handling activities, and we often hear things like that companies uh, mismanaged, or it's not managed well, etc. So these statements imply that it is some type of work, right, or a set of activities, sometimes performed quite well or not so well. It implies that management is a process involving certain functions and activities that managers perform. So management is a discipline, the second point, right? A discipline refers to the field of study where there are well-defined concepts, principles, etc. Classifying management as one implies that it is an accumulated body of knowledge that can be learned. Thus, management is a subject with principles and concepts. Okay, the process of studying management is to learn how to apply principles and concepts at right circumstances at the right time to produce the required result. So the next point there is human activity, right? Management is a human activity. If you say that, say the restaurant has an entirely new management, he's the best manager that I have worked for, etc. So what are we referring to? We are referring to people. So these are people who directly manage organizations, right? The word management here is used to refer to the people who engage in the process of management. Managers are responsible for seeing that work gets done in the organization. Now, management as a career, right? Today, management is developed as a career focused on specialization, like marketing management, finance management, personnel management, industrial management, production management, quality management, etc. Right? So specialists are appointed in various positions of the organizational hierarchy. Hence, it is a career, right? So this is a way of defining or rather thinking of management, right? So the next we have Coons and O'Donnell telling that it's a direction and maintenance of an internal environment in an enterprise where individuals working in groups can perform efficiently and effectively towards attaining group goals. Okay, so F.W. Taylor adds on to it, adding a new dimension here. It says that yes, it's an art of knowing what you want to do and then seeing that it is done in the best and the cheapest way that's possible. Okay, so let's wait again, there's more. So Donald Clough says that it is the art and science of decision making and leadership. So you see that there are various key words that are brought in here, and each of them are adding new dimensions to management. So just let's look at Coons and Donald's definition here again, so which was discussed in the last class nonetheless, but still it's a direction and maintenance of an internal environment. So there's some managing that's happening and direction that's also being given. Basically you're giving this direction to individuals who are in groups, right, such that they can do two things. One, whatever task is there, do it efficiently as well as effectively, both of them. Then towards what are we doing this? Towards attaining some group goals, right? So the same things that probably Mary Parker Follett or George Terry told, Coons and O'Donnell are iterating that again, but with more specificity on how the things have to be done. Okay, so the dimension that F.W. Taylor adds here is that the work be done in the best possible way and the cheapest possible way. And the last one, okay, adds a lot of weightage on the word decision making. Right? So if at all we were to look at the functions that management performs, then we see that there are basically six functions, four basic and two subsidiary. Though there are lots of keywords, okay, management should necessarily perform these six. So the first one is planning. So it's often said that failing to plan is planning to fail. So determining in advance what needs to be done is and that's called planning. So we have organizing is next. So once the plans are made, the decisions must be made as to how best that one can implement the plans. Organizing involves deciding how organization will be structured into teams, job responsibilities, etc. It involves assigning authority and responsibility to various departments, allocating resources across organizations, and defining how activities and groups and individuals will be coordinated. Next, we have leading or directing, or yeah. So almost all things that need to be accomplished in an organization is mostly done by people. uh, Best planning in organization will not be effective if the people in the organization are not willing to support the plans, right? So leaders use their knowledge, character and charisma to generate enthusiasm and inspire effort to achieve the goals. So managers must also lead by communicating whatever goals are given to them throughout the organization by building commitment to a common vision, which is created by shared values, culture, and encouraging high performance. Directing implies that one needs to communicate, lead, motivate to activate or actuate. Okay. So apart from this, management also involves controlling. So though planning is necessary for making preparations at the time to implement the things, it will not go as per the plan many times, right? Unexpected things happen. So observing and responding to what actually happens is called as controlling. It's the process of monitoring activities, measuring performance, comparing results to objectives, and making modifications and corrections when needed. It's a feedback loop. So I always like the Japanese culture, which kind of weaves in this philosophy into their culture. I abbreviate that as PDCA, right? Plan, do, check, action. So this actually is a very essential part of control, right? The three parts of control are: establish standards, first one; second, measure performance; third one, take action to correct. Okay, so these are the four basic functions in management, and then of course there are two extra subsidiary functions. Here we have innovation and representation. Okay, but decision making is something that is never told out loud, but it's very very central to management, right? So innovation involves the introduction of new systems, procedures, methods, techniques, products, services, etc., right? um, Basically it's creating new ideas which may be either resulting in development of new products or finding new users for the old ones. A manager who invents new products is an innovator, like a salesman who persuades Eskimo to buy a refrigerator. He's an innovator, right? So one has to note that innovation is not a separate function but a part of planning, right? So in representation, every role is either substantiative or procedural. Okay, let me expand on that. Representation, here the manager has to spend a significant part of his time representing his organization before like various groups which have some stake in the organization. A manager has to be acting as a representative of a company. He has dealings with customers, suppliers, government officials, banks, trade unions, etc., etc. It's the duty of every manager to have good relationship with others outside of his institute. Okay, so that basically covers various functions. So just to consolidate here, I have written most of them down. So I have highlighted four of them because I feel these are pretty important. Coordination and activation have not been actually listed out there, but nonetheless are very essential to management. Decision making actually tries to make way or facilitate activation, coordination, and controlling. Okay, so this is the same functions written down as to like how does it come boil down finally. We spoke about planning, decision making, organizing, etc. So what exactly constitutes planning, right? So we have defining the vision and mission, group goals, objectives, strategizing, uh, plan of actions to achieve those goals, constituting the functions of planning. In when one organizes, okay, basically one formulates the organizational structure, uh, allocates resources, designs jobs, okay, and then assigns it to the competencies of the people Okay, staffing was not spoken about, is integral to organization. What does that involve? Manpower planning, recruitments, selections, placement trainings, developments, developing the training and competencies, remunerations, promoting and transfer. Okay, so then we have leading and directing. So what constitutes leadership is just not giving orders. Okay, that's more of administrating. So in management, leadership boils down to directing and communicating the ideas and goals by using coordination. And how do you secure the coordination and the cooperation is by motivating, by activating and actuating things, right? So that's about leading. Controlling involves the process and standards, establishing them, reviewing how it's going on, and in individual outputs, whether they are meeting or as per the standards or norms or deviating from it. And then of course taking corrective actions. Now I put two question marks where it comes to innovate and represent. So innovate, there is no one particular function that covers innovate. Like you can't say if one person is doing this then it means he's innovating, right? It contributes to something totally novel, okay, at the end. So representing is when one tries to represent the organization in front of an entity that is outside of it, right? And then of course there is budgeting and forecasting, which I have not dealt with here. So a task for you to visit your bank and identify the functions performed by a bank manager. It should be easy enough, but you'll come to know that there are just no 6 functions. There are umpteen number of functions that are performed, out of which we took a chunk of 6. Now, what is the nature of management? So we need to characterize, this is how management is, right? So we have already defined, we know the functions. Why should we characterize it? Sometimes, you need to know the characteristics of an entity when you try to analyze that and probably work against or work with it, right? So if you know the characteristics of water, then you'll be able to work with it as a medium of art, as something that you can, drink, many things. So you need to know its characteristics and nature well in advance, right? So here comes. Okay, so basically, the idea of management is to not just maintain things, but uh, help the group move towards getting some action by which they complete certain objectives or goals, right? It is oriented towards achieving goals. And necessarily the minute, now this is something very key and central to management. Probably this term has been coined in or has been used ever since humankind has learned that group activity or group efforts is the only way to move ahead. It doesn't mean that it doesn't concern with individual efforts. Yes, management can be applied to self as well, but group efforts and how to secure um, the contribution of others is what is pretty central to management. So it is involved in a multidisciplinary activity that necessarily uses group efforts. Okay, so its dynamic in nature implies that management principles keep changing all the time. You can't have something like a sarvakalika satya that comes across in management all too often. No, it is subjective to many things. Primarily, it changes along the time. Okay, and that said, it doesn't end soon after you have attained certain goals or objectives. It keeps transitioning from one phase to another even after the project is done. So it's a continuous process. Management is a science as well as an art form. So how so we will see later. What is science? Usually it's a systematic body of knowledge. What is art is something very subjective and that can be improved upon with practice of the person who is an artist, right? So management is needed everywhere. It is pervading all spheres. This is something that is like a sarvakalika satya, that is management is universal and it is necessary all through. Okay. So, having seen the nature of management, if one were to characterize it as this is it, this is exactly how management is, one would fall short of words. We have some 13 or 14, or probably, I'll leave you to count how many characteristics. Let's just go one by one along with me. So the first one is that it is universal in nature. Yeah. So we were at how management is a continuous process. So the process of management, as we told, there are definite functions that use resources, right? So we need to see that these resources are used to the best advantages, right? A single function can't actually encompass it. So, management involves a continuous use of planning, organizing, directing, and controlling. So, management is an art as well as a science. It's an art in the sense of possessing management skill by a person who's actually discharging those managerial activities, and a science because certain principles, laws that are developed which are applicable in place where group activities are coordinated. So we'll as I said, this needs much more attention. We'll talk about this later, but the most characteristic point of management is that it is all the activities are geared towards primed towards achieving predetermined objectives. All organizations have objectives that are laid down, and every managerial activity results in achieving those objectives, right? So this is the central thing here. And most as a result, management is a factor of production. An enterprise produces goods or services using resources like land, labor, capital, machines. So these resources themselves can't realize organization goals, right? So the goals are achieved when these are effectively used, coordinated by an entrepreneur. In case of small enterprises, and an individual can do such type of job, whereas in a large enterprise the coordination job is done by a management. Hence it's a factor of production. uh, Management is decision making. I really don't know why this term is underrepresented and not put at the first. I would say that the most important task in management is actually decision making. To remove ambiguities, to ease decision making, one plans better, one tries to organize things, right? So the most important thing in engineering that nobody tells is how to make use of resources and people. So that's not got by the books. So engineering starts when it stops, when learning from the book stops and you start doing on your own, right? Similarly, the experiential part in engineering is something that's essential, or that's central to it. So similarly, decision making is central to management, right? So it is an important function of a manager, like whatever he does by making decisions, the success or failure, everything depends on the quality of the decision, right? So that's something central here. And universal application, I've already told, right? So it's every industry needs it and all that. So yeah, management is needed at all levels. The functions of management are common to all levels of organizations. um, all the functions of planning, organizing, directing, controlling, decision making are performed by top level as well as lower level supervisors. So it's not just limited to any one level. So management aims at maximizing profit, okay, by minimized resource consumptions. So the resources are properly utilized to maximize profit. Maximizing profit is the economic function of a manager. So I was just telling that it is uh, dynamic and not static. So over a period of time, new principles and concepts and techniques that are developed and adopted by management. So it keeps changing and evolving continuously, and accordingly, there's a social change, right? So it's a dynamic process. So it's a career as well as a profession. So management is a career. Let's see, here, as I said earlier, there are different verticals like marketing, finance, personnel, industrial management, production management, quality management. So there are different verticals here, and there's a definite hierarchy, and it is a career, right? As a profession, management is one of the most elite professions sought after, because here, what is profession? We have knowledge being imported and transferred. There are well defined established principles of management applied in the practice. And what is characteristic of a profession is there is a formal education and training, apprenticeship, etc. Right? So this is clearly established in management. Now the last point here is that management is a discipline. A discipline refers to a field of study where well developed concepts, principles, etc. exist, and uh, here it is an accumulated body of knowledge that can be learned. So management is a subject with principles and concepts. The purpose of studying management is to learn how to apply these principles and concepts at right circumstances and at the right time to produce the desired result. Okay, so these are the characteristics. um, I did not actually number them, but they would come up to something like 12 or 13. Okay, so pretty lengthy, but they are sometimes asked. Okay, so here, this particular diagram shows that despite the organization being small or large, right, small or large, and it being profit or not profit, uh, the level of organization, I'll talk about this later, being top or bottom, uh, and whichever vertical you choose, management is needed. So this diagram just illustrates the universality of management. Okay, so levels of management, let's just have a look. If there is a pyramid and I cut it across three sections, the top, middle and the bottom, okay, we have three levels. Similarly, management, okay, this picture crystallizes the idea of management levels, and that's why it's drawn here. So we have top level management constituting people like president, executive vice president, the chairperson, so on and so forth. And we have the middle level managers, okay, who are like chief engineers, divisional leads, etc. Supervisory or first line managers, are foremen, supervisors, section chief, etc. So there are three levels: top, middle, and bottom. So we have, I mean, I've shown you the different cadres necessarily, or rather how are they structured. So just a closer look. So this is an organizational hierarchy in one of the established companies. Okay, so let's just have a closer look. What do we have at the top? A chairman. Okay, and under him we have a president and a CEO, and then we have four vice presidents: vice president, operations, marketing, and we have finance, and of course human resources. Under each vice president we have a general manager, right? We can have a general manager for branding, sales, etc. Each general manager, okay, might be having a regional manager or regional managers. Yeah. So we have here under general manager sales, we have regional managers for north, south, and east and west regions. So it's not necessary that everybody be having such kind of regional managers. You can also have uh, managers under branding who are not necessarily four in number or for different regions. Okay, uh, but a regional manager would necessarily be having under him managers who are from different sections of the region that he's covering. Okay, so the same thing I have blown it up and then shown again and again. So this is what is there to indicate top management indicated by vice president, middle management general manager, and lower management is square and circle inside a square by regional manager. So the same levels we have here, okay, depicted again, but in the we'd like to shed some light on what are the functions that these managers do. So the top level managers are paid extremely high because they are more into conceptualizing things, thinking activities like determining goals, performing planning, organizing, staffing, etc., and integrating the organization with the environment, balancing the interest groups, and basically being responsible for results. So if anything goes down, you know whom to catch. It is not the first line supervisory managers but the people at the top. Okay, so if India fails in cricket, you actually, like, the person who is most talked about is the captain or the person who is coaching them, right? So similarly, we have middle managers who establish programs for their department. The people at the top give them some goals and they break it down to those things that they can do within the periphery, or sorry, within the paradigm or within the boundary of their department, and they carry out functions for achieving these particular goals. So what they need to do in order to achieve this is basically training and developing their employees, and such that they can do it, enabling them, integrating different parts of the department, getting them, creating a bonhomie kind of an atmosphere to get this done. The first line managers, on the other hand, who are basically supervisory, they are they have a lot on their plate. Basically, they are given charge of efficiently using the resources in the organization and producing the maximum output, right? They execute the policies and procedures and making serious there's a lot of decisions that they need to take up at every walk of their life, and luckily they are well defined, and their premises are uh, very specific. Now, these managers need to have basically three types of skills. Okay, I would say it is technical. Okay, whom would you attribute this skill to? So, who needs to have a lot of technical skills? A person who is basically you know dealing with engineering, accounting, some basic rudimentary things, and these people would necessarily be at the bottom of the pyramid. People who are dealing with supervisors, etc., they would need to be much more technically competent. Interpersonal or people skills are attributed to those people again who deal with a lot of people. Whom do we have who deal with a lot of people? The first line managers as well as the middle level managers, right? So why do you need to have people skills? You need to cajole them into getting the work done, you need to motivate them, you need to control them when they go out of line, etc. Conceptual skills are about thinking how things need to be done, how it needs to be framed and put in place, right? So these skills are attributed to the people who are at the top level, and they are able to discern critical factors and determine how the organization can succeed or fail. Okay, so basically I have a picture here to illustrate the same. So what are the skills required in a management? Okay, so if I have technical, interpersonal and conceptual skills, okay, like so, and I have on the top, okay, levels, low, middle and high, sorry, or top level. Okay, so lower level would be those people with highest amount of technical skills. Their interpersonal and conceptual skills, however good they are not much of use. So if I were to break this, using a line, if I were to cut this particular cake, the least share would go to the lowest. Okay, so what I'm trying to